Hello everyone, welcome. In this session, we'll be analyzing previous questions from UPSC Mains 2013 General Studies Paper 2. This is part 2 of Paper 2. If you haven't watched part 1, please go back and watch that. It covers 1 to 15 questions. In this video, we'll be covering from question number 16 onwards. So without any further delay, let us get into the question number 16. Through citizen charters. Be careful when you are reading the question. I cannot stress on the fact that you have to learn how to read the question in a proper way. Though citizen charters have been formulated by many public service delivery organizations, there is no corresponding improvement in the level of citizens' satisfaction and quality of services being provided. Analyze. First, explain what citizen charters are. How important are they for the society? Talk about the limitations of citizens charters. Through that, you can explain why, despite having such citizen charters, we are not seeing the level of services that are being provided to citizens improving in any part of our country. That is how you approach this question. Now moving on to also talk about the legality of citizen charters also. Now moving on to question number 17. A national Lokpal, however strong it may be, cannot resolve the problems of immorality in public affairs. Discuss. First, talk about the Lokpal Bill, the challenges in Lokpal Bill, the goals of the Lokpal Bill, where we are struggling in implementation of the Lokpal Bill. Talk about what public morality is. Talk about the impact of public morality in public affairs. Also talk about the immorality in public affairs. Then you talk about the need for awareness in regards to both Lokpal and also the need for awareness on morals in public affairs. That is how you address this question. Now moving on to question number 18. Question number 18 is the proposed withdrawal of International Security Assistance Force ISAF from Afghanistan in 2014 is fraught with major security implications for the countries of the region. Examine in light of the fact that India is faced with a plethora of challenges and needs to safeguard its own strategic interests. This question is asked in 2013. We know what is the outcome of this question because we are living through it right now. So imagine, look at the question itself. This was asked in 2013. Now it is 2021. Look how the question was framed with that in mind. That is how advanced, that is how analytical, that is how special or specific is UPSC framing the questions. We know the outcome of this answer in reality. The American troops pulled out, and look at the state of Afghanistan right now. But nonetheless, you talk about what ISAF are, what are the impacts of withdrawal of International Security Assistance Force. You talk about the failure of Afghan National Security Forces. You talk about the fallout of withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, and you finally talk about India's interests and India's challenges in the backdrop of no foreign troops in Afghanistan. That is how you address this answer. But this question alone will give you an point of view or an peep into the mindset of UPSC in framing questions. This was in 2013, where they were discussing about withdrawal of troops in 2014. Look how technical, very specific the question is framed here. Please understand the significance of these kinds of questions. Try to understand how UPSC frames questions for their both prelims and mains. That is the goal. That is the goal of this video. Now coming back to question number 19. Question number 19 talks about what do you understand by the string of pearls. Not only that, how does it impact India? Briefly outline the steps taken by India to counter this. First, you talk about what string of pearls is, talk about this specific strategy that China adopted, why China has adopted this strategy, and you talk about how they are trying to implement this strategy, and finally you talk about how India is trying to come out of this strategy by implementing our own kind of counter strategy to the string of pearls Chinese adventure. That is how you answer this question. Now moving on to question number 20. Economic ties between India and Japan, while growing in the recent years, are still far below their potential. Elucidate the policy constraints which are inhibiting this growth. First, you talk about how the trade between India and Japan is. You talk about the investments from Japan into India, because to be very honest, we don't see much of Indian investments going into Japan, but nonetheless there are some, but it's always in the reverse format. You explain those. Then you talk about how Japan has been helping India in implementing certain landmark projects, whether it may be the high-speed rail or it may be road projects, it may be hydro projects, whatever it is. You talk about how China is cooperating both in terms of infrastructure projects and technological projects in India, and then you explain why there is a discrepancy or a difference, or you talk about the bottlenecks in Indian policy that inhibits a proper flourishing of ties, both trade and bilateral and investment, between Japan and India. That is how you approach this question. Now moving on to question number 21. The protests in Shanbagh Square in Dhaka in Bangladesh reveal a fundamental split in society between the nationalists and Islamic forces. What is the significance, or what is its significance for India? First, you talk about the protests that took place there. If the similar question is asked in future, in this regard, first you answer what the protests are. You explain the reasons for the protests. You also explain how the Bangladeshi society has reacted to those protests. Now you talk about why India should be worried, or why India was worried because of this, or the concerns of India in this regard. Now moving on to question number 22. When you look at question number 22, discuss the political developments in Maldives in the last 2 years. Should there be of any concern or cause of concern to India? Remember, talk about again the protests that are taking place in Maldives. This was in 2013, remember, so be mindful of that. But nonetheless, the question itself was, at that point of time there were large scale protests that were taking place against Indian interests, like how they are taking place right now in Maldives. You talk about the political scenario of Maldives. You talk about elections and the overall concerns, security concerns, not only from the political aspect of it, but also from national security aspect of it, and regional security matrix, regional security aspect of it also should be considered for this question. Now moving on to question number 23. When you look at the question number 23, in respect of India-Sri Lanka relations, discuss how domestic factors influence foreign policy. First, you talk about the areas of concern, or the friction areas between India and Sri Lanka. One thing that comes to mind is the Tamil population of Sri Lanka. That is where a lot of friction between India and Sri Lanka, Indo-Lanka relations come from. And I also talk about the regional issues in terms of international pressures, and you talk about the impact of these issues that have on Indo-Lanka relations, and you conclude as to how they have been affecting and what has been done in order to address those issues, and you kind of elucidate or explain on how India have to approach in future, keeping in mind the sentiments of Sri Lanka, not only domestic population in Sri Lanka but also in India because of Tamil Nadu. Now moving on to question number 24. What is meant by Gujarat Doctrine? Does it have any relevance today? discuss. So this is very important. You have to know about Gujarat doctrine in terms of international relations, particularly concerned to India. So you have to explain what the doctrine is. You have to give out the principles of the doctrine, where India's conduct is laid out. Dr. Gujarat laid out certain principles that India must follow in terms of foreign relations, and it talks you have to explain those principles in detail, in the sense that they have to be understandable. Then you explain the importance of following those principles in current scenario. That is how you answer this question. Now moving on to question number 25. The World Bank and the IMF, collectively known as Bretton Woods institutions, are the two intergovernmental pillars supporting the structure of world's economic and financial order. Superficially, the World Bank and IMF exhibit many common characteristics, yet their role, functions and mandate are distinctively different, elucidate. So you talk about Bretton Woods institution, you talk about World Bank functions, you talk about IMF functions, and you outline the differences between both of these organizations, and you conclude the answer by saying that despite coming from the same tree, these two institutions are two branches of the same tree. That is how you conclude this answer. Please like the video, please share this video with your friends and family. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please turn on the notifications by clicking on the bell icon so that you don't miss any notifications. Hope you have learned something new from this video. Thank you.